Your consciousness shines more clearly and lucidly. That is the state of mind known as samhogakaya. In that state, you experience, with unbearable intensity, voidness and brightness inseparable, the voidness bright by nature and the brightness inseparable from the voidness, a state of the primordial or unmodified consciousness, which is the adhikaya, and the power of this, shining unobstructedly, well radiate everywhere, it is the nirmanakaya. These refer to the fundamental wisdom teachings of the Barda Thodal. In all Tibetan systems of yoga, realization of the voidness is the one great aim. To realize it is to attain the unconditioned Dharmakaya, or divine body of truth, the primordial state of uncreatedness, of the supramundane all-consciousness. The Dharmakaya is the highest of the three bodies of the Buddha and of all Buddhas and beings who have perfect enlightenment. The other two bodies are the Samhogakaya or divine body of perfect endowment and the Nirmanakaya or divine body of incarnation. Adhikaya is synonymous with Dharmakaya. The Dharmakaya is primordial, formless essential wisdom. It is true experience freed from all error or inherent or accidental obscuration. It includes both nirvana and samsara, which are polar states of consciousness, but in the realm of pure consciousness identical. The Sambhogakaya embodies, as in the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, reflected or modified wisdom, and the Nirmanakaya embodies, as in the human Buddhas, practical or incarnate wisdom. All enlightened beings who are reborn in this or any other world with full consciousness, as workers for the betterment of their fellow creatures, are said to be Nirmanakaya incarnates. Lama Kazi Dawasamdar, the translator of the Bardo Thodal, held that the Adi Buddha, and all deities associated with the Dharmakaya, are not to be regarded as personal deities, but as personifications of primordial and universal forces, laws or spiritual influences. In the boundless panorama of the existing and visible universe, whatever shapes appear, whatever sounds vibrate, whatever radiances illuminate, or whatever consciousnesses cognize, all are the play of manifestation in the Trikaya, the threefold principle of the cause of all causes, the primordial trinity. In penetrating all, is the all-pervading essence of spirit, which is mind. It is uncreated, impersonal, self-existing, immaterial and indestructible. The Trikaya is the esoteric trinity and corresponds to the exoteric trinity of Buddha, the scriptures and the priesthood, or your own divinity, this manual and your companions. If the voyager is struggling with guilt and penance hallucinations, the greater than instructions for judgment visions may be read. Sexual visions are extremely frequent during the third bardo. You may see or imagine males and females copulating. According to Jung, Psychological Commentary to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Evans Wentz edition, p. x3, Freud's theory is the first attempt made in the West to investigate, as if from below, from the animal sphere of instinct the psychic territory that corresponds in Tantric Lamaism to the Siddha Bardo. The vision described here, in which the person sees mother and father in sexual intercourse, corresponds to the primal scene in psychoanalysis. At this level, then, we begin to see a remarkable convergence of Eastern and Western psychology. Note also the exact correspondence to the psychoanalytic theory of the Oedipus complex. This vision may be internal or it may involve the people around you. You may hallucinate multi-person orgies and experience both desire and shame, attraction and disgust. You may wonder what sexual performance is expected of you and have doubts about your ability to perform at this time. When these visions occur, remember to withhold yourself from action or attachment. Have faith and float gently with the stream. Trust in the unity 38 of life and in your companions. If you attempt to enter into your old ego because you are attracted or repulsed, if you try to join or escape from the orgy you are hallucinating, you will re-enter on an animal or neurotic level. If you become conscious of maleness, hatred of the father together with jealousy and attraction towards the mother will be experienced. If you become conscious of femaleness, hatred of the mother together with attraction and fondness for the father is experienced. It is perhaps needless to say that this kind of self-centered sexuality has little in common with the sexuality of transpersonal experiences. Physical union can be one expression or manifestation of cosmic union. Visions of sexual union may sometimes be followed by visions of conception. You may actually visualize the sperm uniting with the ovum, of intrauterine life and birth through the womb. Some people claim to have relived their own physical birth in psychedelic sessions, and occasionally confirming evidence for such claims has been put forward. Whether this is so or not may be left as a question to be decided by empirical evidence. Sometimes the birth visions will be clearly symbolic, e.g., emergence from a cocoon, breaking out of a shell, etc. Whether the birth vision is constructed from memory or fantasy, the psychedelic voyager should try to recognize the signs indicating the type of personality that is being reborn. The greater than instructions for sexual visions may be read to the voyager who is struggling with sexual hallucinations. VI. Methods for preventing the re-entry. Although many confrontations and recognition points have been given, the person may be ill-prepared and still be wandering back to game reality. It is of advantage to postpone the return for as long as possible, thus maximizing the degree of enlightenment in the subsequent personality. For this reason, 4 meditative methods are given for prolonging the ego-lost state. They are: 1. Meditation on the Buddha or guide, 2. Concentration on good games, 3. Meditation on illusion, and 4. Meditation on the void. See the greater than 4 methods of preventing re-entry. Each one attempts to lead the voyager back to the first bardo central stream of energy from which he has been separated by game involvements. One may ask how these meditative methods, which seem difficult for the ordinary person, can be effective. The answer given in the Tibetan Bardo Thodal is that due to the increased suggestibility and openness of the mind in the psychedelic state, these methods can be used by anyone, regardless of intellectual capacity or proficiency in meditation. VII. Methods of choosing the post-session personality. Choosing the post-session ego is an extremely profound art and should not be undertaken carelessly or hastily. One should not return fleeing from hallucinated tormentors. Such re-entry will tend to bring the person to one of the 3 lower levels. One should first banish the fear by visualizing one's protective figure or the Buddha, then choose calmly and impartially. The limited foreknowledge available to the voyager should be used to make a wise choice. In the Tibetan tradition, each of the levels of game existence is associated with a particular color and also certain geographical symbols. These may be different for 20th century Westerners. Each person has to learn to decode his own internal roadmap. The Tibetan indicators may be 39 used as a starting point. The purpose is clear. One should follow the signs of the 3 higher types and shun those of the 3 lower. One should follow light and pleasant visions and shun dark and dreary ones. The world of saints, devas, is said to shine with a white light and to be preceded by visions of delightful temples and jeweled mansions. The world of heroes, asuras, has a green light and is signaled by magical forests and fire images. The ordinary human world has a yellow light. Animal existence is foreshadowed by a blue light and images of caves and deep holes in the earth. The world of neurotics or unsatisfied spirits has a red light and visions of desolate plains and forest wastes. The hell world emits a smoke-colored light and is preceded by sounds of wailing, visions of gloomy lands, black and white houses and black roads along which you have to travel. Use your foresight to choose a good post-session robot. Do not be attracted to your old ego. Whether you choose to pursue power, or status, or wisdom, or learning, or servitude, or whatever, choose impartially, without being attracted or repelled. Enter into game existence with good grace, voluntarily and freely. Visualize it as a celestial mansion, i.e., as an opportunity to exercise game ecstasy. Have faith in the protection of the deities and choose. The mood of complete impartiality is important since you may be in error. A game that appears good may later turn out to be bad. Complete impartiality, freedom from want or fear, ensure that a maximally wise choice is made. As you return, you see spread out before you the world, your former life, a planet full of fascinating objects and events. Each aspect of the return trip can be a delightful discovery. Soon you will be descending to take your place in worldly events. The key to this return voyage is simply this: take it easy, slowly, naturally. Enjoy every second. Don't rush. Don't be attached to your old games. Recognize that you are in the re-entry period. Do not return with any emotional pressure. Everything you see and touch can glow with radiance. Each moment can be a joyous discovery. Here end the third bardo, the period of re-entry. General conclusion: well-prepared students with advanced spiritual understanding can use the transference principle at the moment of ego death and need not traverse subsequent bardo states. They will rise to a state of illumination and remain there throughout the entire period. Others, who are a little less experienced in spiritual discipline, will recognize the clear light in the second stage of the first bardo and will then win liberation. Others, at a still less advanced level, may be liberated while experiencing one of the positive or negative visions of the second bardo. Since there are several turning points, liberation can be obtained at one or the other through recognition at moments of confrontation. Those of very weak karmic connection, i.e., those who have been involved in heavy ego-dominated game playing, will have to wander downwards to the third bardo. Again, many points for liberation have been charted. The weakest persons will fall under the influence of guilt and terror. For weaker persons there are various graded teachings for preventing the return to routine reality, or at least for choosing it wisely. Through applying the methods of visualization described, they should be able to experience the benefits of the session. Even those persons whose familiar routines are primitive and egocentric can be prevented from entering into misery. Once they have experienced, for however short a period, the great beauty and power of free awareness, they may, in the next period, meet with a guide or friend who will initiate them further into the way. 40. The way in which this teaching is effective, even for a voyager already in the Siddha Bardo, is as follows. Each person has some positive and some negative game residues, karma. The continuity of consciousness has been broken by an ego death for which the person was not prepared. The teachings are like a trough in a broken water drain, temporarily restoring the continuity with positive karma. As stated before, the extreme suggestibility or detached quality of consciousness in this state ensures the efficacy of listening to the doctrine. The teaching embedded in this manual may be compared to a catapult which can direct the person towards the goal of liberation, or like the moving of a big wooden beam, which is so heavy that 100 men cannot carry it, but by being floated on water it can be easily moved. Or it is like controlling a horse's bit and course by the use of a bridle. Therefore, these teachings should be vividly impressed on the voyager, again and again. This manual may also be used more generally. It should be recited as often as possible and committed to memory as far as possible. When an ego death or final death comes, recognize the symptoms, recite the manual to yourself, and reflect upon the meaning. If you cannot do it yourself, ask a friend to read it to you. There is no doubt as to its liberative power. It liberates by being seen or heard, without need of ritual or complex meditation. This profound teaching liberates those of great evil karma through the secret pathway. One should not forget its meaning and the words, even though pursued by 7 mastiffs. By this select teaching, one obtains Buddhahood at the moment of ego loss. Were the Buddhas of past, present and future to seek, they could not find any doctrine transcending this. Here ends the Bardo Thodal, known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead 3. Some technical comments about psychedelic sessions. 1. Use of this manual. The most important use of this manual is for preparatory reading. Having read the Tibetan manual, one can immediately recognize symptoms and experiences which might otherwise be terrifying, only because of lack of understanding as to what was happening. Recognition is the key word. Secondly, this guidebook may be used to avoid paranoid traps or to regain the first bardo transcendence if it has been lost. If the experience starts with light, peace, mystic unity, understanding, and if it continues along this path, then there is no need to remember this manual or have this manual read to you. Like a road map, we consult it only when lost, or when we wish to change course. Usually, however, the ego clings to its old games. There may be momentary discomfort or confusion. If this happens, the others present should not be sympathetic or show alarm. They should be prepared to stay calm and restrain their helping games. In particular, the doctor role should be avoided. If at any time you find yourself struggling to get back to routine reality, you can, by pre-arrangement, have a more experienced person, a fellow voyager, or a trusted observer read parts of this manual to you. Passages suitable for reading during this session are given in Part 4 below. Each major descriptive section of the Tibetan book has an appropriate 41 instruction text. One may want to pre-record selected passages and simply flick on the recorder when desired. The aim of these instruction texts is always to lead the voyager back to the original first bardo transcendence and to help maintain that as long as possible. A third use would be to construct a program for a session using passages from the text. The aim would be to lead the voyager to one of the visions deliberately, or through a sequence of visions. The guide or friend could read the relevant passages, show slides or pictures or symbolic figures of processes, play carefully selected music, etc. One can envision a high art of programming psychedelic sessions, in which symbolic manipulations in presentations would lead the voyager through ecstatic visionary bead games. 2. Planning a session. In planning a session, the first question to be decided is, what is the goal? Classic Hinduism suggests 4 possibilities. 1. For increased personal power, intellectual understanding, sharpened insight into self and culture, improvement of life situation, accelerated learning, professional growth. 2. For duty, help of others, providing care, rehabilitation, rebirth for fellow men. 3. For fun, sensuous enjoyment, aesthetic pleasure, interpersonal closeness, pure experience. 4. For transcendence, liberation from ego and space-time limits, attainment of mystical union. This manual aims primarily at the latter goal, that of liberation and enlightenment. This emphasis does not preclude attainment of the other goals. In fact, it guarantees their attainment because illumination requires that the person be able to step out beyond game problems of personality, role, and professional status. The initiate can decide beforehand to devote the psychedelic experience to any of the 4 goals. The manual will be of assistance in any event. If there are several people having a session together, they should either agree collaboratively on a goal, or at least be aware of each other's goals. If the session is to be programmed, then the participants should either agree on or design the program collaboratively, or they should agree to let one member of the group do the programming. Unexpected or undesired manipulations by one of the participants can easily trap the other voyagers into paranoid third bardo delusions. The voyager, especially in an individual session, may also wish to have either an extroverted or an introverted experience. In the extroverted transcendent experience, the self is ecstatically fused with external objects, e.g. flowers, or other people. In the introverted state, the self is ecstatically fused with internal life processes, lights, energy waves, bodily events, biological forms, etc. Of course, either the extroverted or the introverted state may be negative rather than positive, depending on the attitude of the voyager. Also, it may be primarily conceptual or primarily emotional. The 8 types of experience thus derived, 4 positive and 4 negative, have been described more fully in Visions 2 to 5 of the second bardo. 42 For the extroverted mystic experience, one would bring to the session objects or symbols to guide the awareness in the desired direction. Candles, pictures, books, incense, music or recorded passages. An introverted mystic experience requires the elimination of all stimulation. No light, no sound, no smell, no movement. The mode of communication with the other participants should also be agreed on beforehand. You may agree on certain signals, silently indicating companionship. Of personality, role, and professional status. The initiate can decide beforehand to devote the psychedelic experience to any of the 4 goals. The manual will be of assistance in any event. If there are several people having a session together, they should either agree collaboratively on a goal, or at least be aware of each other's goals. If the session is to be programmed, then the participants should either obtain when injected intramuscularly in dosages of 50-60 mg, gives an experience approximately equivalent to 500 micrograms of LSD, but which lasts only 30 minutes. Some persons have found it useful to take other drugs before the session. A very anxious person, for example, may take 30 to 40 milligrams of Librium about an hour earlier, to calm and relax himself. Methadone has also been used to induce a pleasant, euphoric mood prior to the session. Sometimes, with excessively nervous persons, it is advisable to stagger the drug administration. For example, 200 micrograms of LSD may be taken initially, and a booster of another 200 micrograms may be taken after the person has become familiar with some of the effects of the psychedelic state. Nausea may sometimes occur. Usually this is a mental symptom, indicating fear, and should be regarded as such. Sometimes, however, particularly with the use of morning glory seeds in peyote, the nausea can have a physiological cause. Anti-NAUSEANT drugs such as marazine, bonamine, dramamine or T-GAD may be taken beforehand to prevent this. If a person becomes trapped in a repetitive game routine during a session, it is sometimes possible to break the set by administering 50 milligrams of DMT, or even 25 milligrams of dexedrine or methadone. Such additional dosages, of course, should only be given with the person's own knowledge and consent. Should external emergencies call for it, Thorazine 100-200 mg IM or other PHENOTHIAZINE type tranquilizers will terminate the effects of psychedelic drugs. Antidotes should not be used simply because the voyager or the guide is frightened. Instead, the appropriate sections of the third bardo should be read. Further, more detailed suggestions concerning dosage 300-500 mg 20-30 mg 43 may be found in a paper by Gary N. Fisher. Some comments concerning dosage levels.
Hey, bonjour, je peux vous aider? Vous cherchez un PC portable? Oh, bougez
Is
surtout
of
pas, je
critical
reviens.
importance in determining how the experience
Eh ben, j'en ai
unfolds.
plein.
People tend naturally to
Processeur
impose their
4
personal and
Génial,
social game
4 heures.
perspectives on any new
Et là,
situation.
c'est écrit
Careful thought should
sans
precede the
os.
session to prevent narrow
Oh,
sets
mais
being
il est beau.
imposed. Medical
C'est
expectations.
pas beau.
Some ill-prepared
Info. Le
subjects
stockage, c'est
unconsciously
important, le
impose a
stockage.
medical
C'est
model
même
on the
super
experience.
important.
They
Le
look for
stockage.
symptoms, interpret each new
Avec
sensation in
cette
terms of
solution
sickness,
tournée,
health,
vous voulez
place
un
the
PC
guide in a
portable pour
doctor
jouer, c'est
role,
ça?
and,
Quel genre
if
de jeu?
anxiety develops,
D'accord. Est-ce
demand
que vous avez
chemical
l'idée de la taille
rebirth,
d'écran?
i.e., tranquilizers. Occasionally
Comme
one
idée?
hears of
Puis il y a
casual,
le DLC?
ill-planned, non-guided sessions which end in the subject demanding to be hospitalized, etc. It is even more problem-provoking if the guide employs a medical model, watches for symptoms, and keeps hospitalization in mind to fall back on, as protection for himself. Rebellion against convention may be the motive of some people who take the drug. The idea of doing something far out or vaguely naughty is a naive set which can color the experience. Intellectual expectations are appropriate when subjects have had much psychedelic experience. Indeed, LSD offers vast possibilities for accelerated learning and scientific scholarly research. But for initial
Magic mushroom, 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 spores, 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 endless hallucinogenic moving patterns.
Kaleidoscopic hallucinogenic patterns. exploding nuclear mysticism.
sowas erkennt man die Realität. Sowas erkennt man die Realität.
1963 of profound admiration and gratitude. If you started in the wrong way, I said in answer to the investigator's questions, everything that happened would be a proof of the conspiracy against you. It would all be self-validating. You couldn't draw a breath without knowing it was part of the plot. So you think you know where madness lies? My answer was a convinced and heartfelt yes. And you couldn't control it? No, I couldn't control it. If one began with fear and hate as the major premise, one would have to go on the conclusion. Would you be able, my wife asked, to fix your attention on what the Tibetan Book of the Dead calls the clear light? I was doubtful. Would it keep the evil away, if you could hold it? Or would you not be able to hold it? I considered the question for some time. Perhaps, I answered at last, perhaps I could, but only if there were somebody there to tell me about the clear light. One couldn't do it by oneself. That's the point, I suppose, of the Tibetan ritual, somebody sitting there all the time and telling you what's what. Doors of Perception, 5758I. General Introduction. A psychedelic experience is a journey to new realms of consciousness. The scope and content of the experience is limitless, but its characteristic features are the transcendence of verbal concepts, of space-time dimensions, and of the ego or identity. Such experiences of enlarged consciousness can occur in a variety of ways. Sensory deprivation, yoga exercises, disciplined meditation, religious or aesthetic ecstasies, or spontaneously. Most recently they have become available to anyone through the ingestion of psychedelic drugs such as LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, DMT, 1 etc. This is the statement of an ideal, not an actual situation. In 1964, the psychedelic drugs are in the United States classified as experimental. Available on a prescription basis, but only to qualified investigators. The Federal Food and Drug Administration has defined qualified investigators to mean psychiatrists working in a mental hospital setting, whose research is sponsored by either state or federal agencies. Of course, the drug dose does not produce the transcendent experience. It merely acts as a chemical key. It opens the mind, frees the nerve system of its ordinary patterns and structures. The nature of the experience depends almost entirely on set and setting. Set denotes the preparation of the individual, including his personality structure and his mood at the time. Setting is physical, the weather, the room's atmosphere, social, feelings of persons present towards one another, and cultural, prevailing views as to what is real. It is for this reason that manuals or is to enable a person to understand the new realities of the observe as road has made accessible. Different explorers draw different maps. Other manuals are to be written based on different models, scientific, aesthetic, therapeutic. The Tibetan model, on which this manual is based, is designed to teach the person to direct and control awareness in such a way as to reach that level of understanding variously called liberation, illumination, or enlightenment. If the manual is read several times before a session is attempted, and if a trusted person is there to remind and refresh the memory of the voyager during the experience, the consciousness will be freed from the games which comprise personality and from positive-negative hallucinations which often accompany states of expanded awareness. The Tibetan Book of the Dead was called in its own language the Bardo, which means liberation by hearing on the after-death plane. The book stresses over and over that the free consciousness has only to hear and remember the teachings in order to be liberated. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is ostensibly a book describing the experiences to be expected at the moment of death, during an intermediate phase lasting 49, 7 times 7 days, and during rebirth into another bodily frame. This, however, is merely the exoteric framework which the Tibetan Buddhists cloak their mystical teachings. The language and symbolism of death rituals of Bomism, the traditional pre-Buddhist Tibetan religion, were skillfully blended with Buddhist conceptions. The esoteric meaning, as it has been interpreted in this manual, is that it is death and rebirth that is described, not of the body. Lama Govinda indicates this clearly in his introduction when he writes, "It is a book for the living as well as the dying." The book's esoteric meaning is often concealed beneath many layers of symbolism. It was not intended for general reading. It was designed to be understood only by one who is to be initiated personally by a guru into the Buddhist mystical doctrines, into the pre-MORTEM-death-rebirth experience. These doctrines have been kept a closely guarded secret for many centuries, for fear that naive or careless application would do harm. In translating such an esoteric text, therefore, there are two steps: 1, the rendering of the original text into English, and 2, the practical interpretation of the text for its uses. In publishing this practical interpretation for use in the psychedelic drug session, we are in a sense breaking with the tradition of secrecy and thus contravening the teachings of the Lama Gurus. However, the step is justified on the grounds that the manual will not be understood by anyone who has not had a consciousness-expanding experience, and that there are signs that the Lamas themselves, after their recent diaspora, wish to make their teachings available to a wider public. Following the Tibetan model then, we distinguish three phases of the psychedelic experience. The first period, Chekhyai Bardo, is that of complete transcendence, beyond words, beyond space-time, beyond self. There are no visions, no sense of self, no thoughts. There are only pure awareness and ecstatic freedom from all game and biological involvements. Games are behavioral sequences defined by roles, rules, rituals, goals, strategies, values, language, characteristic space-time locations and characteristic patterns of movement. Any behavior not having these 9 features is non-game. This includes physiological reflexes, spontaneous play, and transcendent awareness. The second lengthy period involves self, or external game reality, Chanya Bardo, in sharp exquisite clarity or in the form of hallucinations, karmic apparitions. The final period, Siddha Bardo, involves the return to routine game reality and the self. For most persons the second, aesthetic or hallucinatory stage is the longest. For the initiated the first stage of illumination lasts longer. For the unprepared, the heavy game players, those who anxiously cling to their egos, and for those who take the drug in a non-supportive setting, the struggle to regain reality begins early and usually lasts to the end of their session. Words like these are static, whereas the psychedelic experience is fluid and ever-changing. Typically the subject's consciousness flicks in and out of these 3 levels with rapid oscillations. One purpose of this manual is to enable the person to regain the transcendence of the first bardo and to avoid prolonged entrapment in hallucinatory or ego-dominated game patterns. The basic trusts and beliefs. You must be ready to accept the possibility that there is a limitless range of awareness for which we now have no words. That awareness can expand beyond range of your ego, yourself, your familiar identity, beyond everything you have learned, beyond your notions of space and time, beyond the differences which usually separate people from each other and from the world around them. You must remember that throughout human history, saints or Buddhists have made which you have necessary productions of your mind. Whether you experience heaven or hell, remember that it is your try to maintain faith and trust in the potentiality of your own brain and the billion-year-old life process. With your ego left behind you, the brain can't go wrong. Try to keep the memory of a trusted friend or respected person whose name is a guide and protection. Trust your divinity, trust your brain, trust your opinions. Whenever in doubt, turn off your mind, relax, float downstream. After reading this guide, the prepared person should be able, at the very beginning of his experience, to move directly to a state of non-game ecstasy and deep revelation. But if you are not well prepared, or if there's game distraction around you, you will find yourself dropping back. If this happens, then the instructions in Part 4 should help you regain and maintain liberation. Liberation in this context does not necessarily imply, especially in the case of the average person, the liberation of nirvana, but chiefly a liberation of the life flux from the ego, in such a manner as will afford the greatest free possible consciousness and consequent happy rebirth. Yet for the very experienced and very highly efficient person, the same esoteric process of transference, readers interested in a more detailed discussion of the process of transference are referred to Tibetan Yoga and Secret Doctrines, edited by W.Y. Evans-Wentz, Oxford University Press, 1958, can be, according to the Lama Gurus, so employed as to prevent any break in the flow of the stream of consciousness, from the moment of the ego loss to the moment of a conscious rebirth, 8 hours later. Judging from the translation made by the late Lama Kagyu Dawasamdik, of an old Tibetan manuscript containing practical directions for ego loss states, the ability to maintain a non-game ecstasy throughout the entire experience is possessed only by persons trained in mental concentration, or one-pointedness of mind, to such a high degree of proficiency as to be able to control all the mental functions and to shut out the distractions of the outside world. Evans-Wentz, p. 86. Note 2. This manual is divided into 4 parts. The first part is introductory. The second is a step-by-step description of a psychedelic experience based directly on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The third part contains practical suggestions on how to prepare for and conduct a psychedelic session. The fourth part contains instructive passages adapted from the Bardo Thodo, which may be read to the voyager during this session, to facilitate the movement of consciousness. In the remainder of this introductory section, we review 3 commentaries on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, published with the Evans-Wentz edition. These are the introduction by Evans-Wentz himself, the distinguished translator-editor of 4 treatises on Tibetan mysticism, the commentary by Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, and by Lama Govinda, and initiate of one of the principal Buddhist orders of Tibet. A tribute to W.Y. Evans-Wentz, Dr. Evans-Wentz, who literally sat at the feet of a Tibetan Lama for years, in order to acquire his wisdom, not only displays a deeply sympathetic interest in those esoteric doctrines so characteristic of the genius of the East, but likewise possesses the rare faculty of making them more or less intelligible to the layman. Quoted from a book review in anthropology on the back of the Oxford University Press edition of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. W.Y. Evans-Wentz is a great scholar who devoted his mature years to the role of bridge and shuttle between Tibet and the West, like an RNA molecule activating the latter with the coded message of the former. No greater tribute could be paid to the work of this academic liberator than to base our psychedelic manual upon his insights and to quote directly his comments on the message of this book. The message is that the art of dying is quite as important as the art of living, or of coming into birth, of which it is the complement and summation, that the future of being is dependent, perhaps entirely, upon a rightly controlled death, as the second part of this volume, setting forth the art of reincarnating, emphasizes. The art of dying, as indicated by the death rite associated with initiation into the mysteries of antiquity, and referred to by Apuleius, the Platonic philosopher, himself an initiate, and by many other illustrious initiate, and as the Egyptian Book of the Dead suggests, appears to have been far better known to the ancient peoples inhabiting the Mediterranean countries than it is now by their descendants in Europe and the Americas. To those who had passed through the secret experiencing of pre-A.R.T.E.M. death, right dying is initiation, conferring, as does the initiatory death rite, the power to control consciously the process of death and regeneration. Evans-Wentz, p. X3XIV, the Oxford scholar, like his great predecessor of the 11th century, Marpa, The translator, who rendered Indian Buddhist texts into Tibetan, thereby preserving them from extinction, saw the vital importance of these doctrines and made them accessible to many. The secret is no longer hidden. The art of dying is quite as important as the art of living. A tribute to Carl Jung's psychology is the systematic attempt to describe and explain man's behavior, both conscious and non-conscious. The scope of study is broad, covering the infinite variety of human activity and experience, and it is long. Tracing back through the history of the individual, through the history of his ancestors, back through the evolutionary vicissitudes and triumphs which have determined the current status of the species. Most difficult of all, the scope of psychology is complex, dealing as it does with processes which are ever-changing. Little wonder that psychologists, in the face of such complexity, escape into specialization and parochial narrowness. A psychology is based on the available data and the psychologist's ability and willingness to utilize them. The behaviorism and experimentalism of 20th century Western psychology is so narrow as to be mostly trivial. Consciousness is eliminated from the field of inquiry. Social application and social meaning are largely neglected. A curious ritualism is enacted by a priesthood rapidly growing in power and numbers. Eastern psychology, by contrast, offers us a long history of detailed observation and systematization of the range of human consciousness along with an enormous literature of practical methods for controlling and changing consciousness. Western intellectuals tend to dismiss Oriental psychology. The theories of consciousness are seen as occult and mystical. The methods of investigating consciousness change, such as meditation, yoga, monastic retreat, and sensory deprivation, and are seen as alien to scientific investigation. And most damning of all in the eyes of the European scholar, is the alleged disregard of Eastern psychologies for the practical, behavioral and social aspects of life. Such criticism betrays limited concepts and the inability to deal with the available historical data on a meaningful level. The psychologies of the East have always found practical application in the running of the state, in the running of daily life and family. A wealth of guides and handbooks exists. The Book of Tao, the Analects of Confucius, the Gita, the I Ching, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, to mention only the best known. Eastern psychology can be judged in terms of the use of available evidence. The scholars and observers of China, Tibet, and India went as far as their data allowed them. They lacked the findings of modern science and so their metaphors seem vague and poetic. Yet this does not negate their value. Indeed, Eastern philosophic theories dating back 4,000 years adapt readily to the most recent discoveries of nuclear physics, biochemistry, genetics, and astronomy. A major task of any present-day psychology, Eastern or Western, is to construct a frame of reference large enough to incorporate the recent findings of the energy sciences into a revised picture of man. Judged against the criterion of the use of available fact, the greatest psychologists of our century are William James and Carl Jung. To properly compare Jung with Sigmund Freud, we must look at the available data which each man appropriated for his explorations. For Freud, it was Darwin, classical thermodynamics, the Old Testament, Renaissance cultural history, and most important, the close overheated atmosphere of the Jewish family. The broader scope of Jung's reference materials assures that his theories will find a greater congeniality with recent developments in the energy sciences and the evolutionary sciences. Both of these men avoided the narrow paths of behaviorism and experimentalism. Both fought to preserve experience and consciousness as an area of scientific research. Both kept open to the advance of scientific theory, and both refused to shut off Eastern scholarship from consideration. Jung used for his source of data, at most fertile source, the internal. He recognized the rich meaning of the Eastern message. He reacted to that great Rorschach ink blot, the Tao Te Ching. He wrote perceptive brilliant forewords to the I Ching, to the secret of the golden flower, and struggled with the meaning of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. for years, ever since it was first published, the Bardo Photo has been my constant companion, and to I owe not only many stimulating ideas and discoveries, but also many fundamental insights. Its philosophy contains the quintessence of Buddhist psychological criticism, and, as such, one can truly say that it is of an unexampled superiority. The Bardo Photo is in the highest degree psychological in its outlook, but, with us, philosophy and theology are still in the medieval, pre-psychological stage where only the assertions are listened to, explained, defended, criticized and disputed, while the authority that makes them has, by general consent, been deposed as outside the scope of discussion. Metaphysical assertions, however, are statements of the psyche, and are therefore psychological. To the Western mind, which compensates its well-known feelings of resentment by a slavish regard for rational explanations, this obvious truth seems all too obvious, or else it is seen as an admissible negation of metaphysical truth. Whenever the Westerner hears the word psychological, it always sounds to him like only psychological. Jung draws upon Oriental conceptions of consciousness to broaden the concept of projection. Not only the wrathful, but also the peaceful deities are conceived as samsaric projections of the human psyche, an idea that seems all too obvious to the enlightened European, because it reminds him of his own banal simplifications. But though the European can easily explain away these deities as projections, he would be quite incapable of positing them at the same time as real. The Bardo Photo can do that, because, in certain of its most essential metaphysical premises, it has the enlightened as well as the unenlightened European at a disadvantage. The ever-present, unspoken assumption of the Bardo Photo is the anti-nominal character of all metaphysical assertions, and also the idea of the qualitative difference of the various levels of consciousness and of the metaphysical realities conditioned by them. The background of this unusual book is not the niggardly European, either-or, but a magnificently affirmative, both-and. This statement may appear objectionable to the Western philosopher, for the West loves clarity and unambiguity. Consequently, one philosopher clings to the position, God is, while another clings equally fervently to the negation, God is not. Jung clearly sees the power and breadth of the Tibetan model, but occasionally he fails to grasp its meaning and application. Jung, too, was limited, as we all are, to the social models of his tribe. He was a psychoanalyst, the father of a school. Psychotherapy and psychiatric diagnosis were the two applications which came most naturally to him. Jung misses the central concept of the Tibetan Book. This is not, as Lama Govinda reminds us, a book of the dead. It is a book of the dying, which is to say a book of the living. It is a book of life and how to live. The concept of actual physical death was an exoteric facade adopted to fit the prejudices of the Buddhist tradition in Tibet. Far from being an embalmer's guide, the manual is a detailed account of how to lose the ego, how to break out of personality into new realms of consciousness, and how to avoid the involuntary limiting processes of the ego, how to make the consciousness expansion experience endure in subsequent daily life. Jung struggles with this point. He comes close but never quite clinches it. He had nothing in his conceptual framework which could make practical sense out of the ego loss experience. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, or the Bardo Photo, is a book of instructions for the dead and dying. Like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it is meant to be a guide for the dead man during the period of his Bardo existence. In this quote, Jung settles for the exoteric and misses the esoteric. In a later quote, it seems to come closer. The instruction given in the Bardo Photo serves to recall to the dead man the experience of his initiation in the teachings of his guru, for the instruction is, at bottom, nothing less than an initiation of the dead into the Bardo life, just as the initiation of the living is a preparation for the beyond. Such was the case, at least, with all the mystery cults and ancient civilizations from the time of the Egyptian and Eleusinian mysteries. In the initiation of the living, however, this beyond is not a world beyond the mind's and outlook, a psychological, or, in Christian terms, redemption from the trammels of the world and of sin. Redemption is a separation and deliverance from an earlier condition of darkness and unconsciousness, and leads to a condition of illumination and releasedness, to victory and transcendence over everything given. Thus far the Bardo is, as Dr. Evans Wentz also feels, an initiation process whose purpose it is to restore to the soul the divinity it lost at birth. In still another passage Jung continues the struggle but misses again, nor is the psychological use we make of it, the Tibetan Book, anything but a secondary intention, though one that is possibly sanctioned by Lamai's custom. The real purpose of this singular book is the attempt, which must seem very strange to the educated European of the 20th century, to enlighten the dead on their journey through the regions of the Bardo. The Catholic Church is the only place in the world of the white man where any provision is made for the souls of the departed. In the summary of Lama Govind's comments which follow we shall see that the Tibetan commentator, freed from the European concepts of Jung, moves directly to the esoteric and practical meaning of the Tibetan Book. In his autobiography, written in 1960, Jung commits himself wholly to the inner vision and to the wisdom and superior reality of internal perceptions. In 1938, when his Tibetan commentary was written, he was moving in this direction but cautiously and with the ambivalent reservations of the psychiatrist cum mystic. The dead man must desperately resist the dictates of reason, as we understand it, and give up the supremacy of egohood, regarded by reason as sacrosanct. What this means in practice is complete capitulation to the 7 objective powers of the psyche, with all that this entails. A kind of symbological death, corresponding to the judgment of the dead in the Sutta Bardo. It means the end of all conscious, rational, morally responsible conduct of life, and a voluntary surrender to what the Bardo Thodol calls karmic illusion. Karmic illusion springs from belief in a visionary world of an extremely irrational nature, which neither accords with nor derives from our rational judgments but is the exclusive product of uninhibited imagination. It is sheer dream or fantasy, and every well-meaning person will instantly caution us against it, nor indeed can one see at first sight what is the difference between fantasies of this kind and the phantasmagoria of a lunatic. Very often only a slight abasement du niveau mental is needed to unleash this world of illusion. The terror and darkness of this moment has its equivalent in the experiences described in the opening sections of the Sutta Bardo. But the contents of this Bardo also reveal the archetypes, the karmic images which appear first in their terrifying form. The Jhana state is equivalent to a deliberately induced psychosis. The transition, then, from the Sutta state to the Jhana state is a dangerous reversal of the aims and intentions of the conscious mind. It is a sacrifice of the ego's stability and a surrender to the extreme uncertainty of what must seem like a chaotic riot of phantasmal forms. When Freud coined the phrase that the ego was the true seat of anxiety, he was giving voice to a very true and profound intuition. Fear of self-sacrifice lurks deep in every ego, and this fear is often only the precariously controlled demand of the unconscious forces to burst out in full strength. No one who strives for selfhood individuation is spared this dangerous passage, for that which is feared also belongs to the wholeness of the self, the subhuman, or suprahuman, world of psychic dominance from which the ego originally emancipated itself with enormous effort, and then only partially, for the sake of a more or less illusory freedom. This liberation is certainly a very necessary and very heroic undertaking, but it represents nothing final. It is merely the creation of a subject who, in order to find fulfillment, has still to be confronted by an object. This, at first sight, would appear to be the world, which is swelled out with projections for that very purpose. Here we seek and find our difficulties, here we seek and find our enemy, here we seek and find what is dear and precious to us. And it is comforting to know that all evil and all good is to be found out there, in the visible object, where it can be conquered, punished, destroyed or enjoyed. But nature herself does not allow this paradisal state of innocence to continue forever. There are, and always have been, those who cannot help but see that the world and its experiences are in the nature of a symbol, and that it really reflects something that lies hidden in the subject himself, in his own transsubjective reality. It is from this profound intuition, according to LeMay's doctrine, that the Jhana state derives its true meaning, which is why the Jhana bardo is entitled, the bardo of the experiencing of reality. The reality experienced in the Jhana state is, as the last section of the corresponding bardo teaches, the reality of thought. The thought forms appear as realities, fantasy takes on real form, and the terrifying dream evoked by karma and played out by the unconscious dominance begins. Jung would not have been surprised by professional and institutional antagonism to psychedelics. He closes his Tibetan commentary with a poignant political aside. The Bardo Thodol began by being a closed book, and so it has remained, no matter what kind of commentaries may be written upon it. For it is a book that will only open itself to spiritual understanding, and this is a capacity which no man is born with, but which he can only acquire through special training and special experience. It is good that such to all intents and purposes useless books exist. They are meant for those queer folk who no longer set much store by the uses, aims, and meaning of present-day civilization, to provide special training for the special experience provided by psychedelic materials is the purpose of this version of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a tribute to Lama Nyingka. In the preceding section, the point was made that Eastern philosophy and psychology, poetic, indeterministic, experiential, inward-looking, vaguely evolutionary, open-ended, is more easily adapted to the findings of modern science than the syllogistic, certain, experimental, externalizing logic of Western psychology. The latter imitates the irrelevant rituals of the energy sciences, but ignores the data of physics and genetics, the meanings and implications. Even Carl Jung, the most penetrating of the Western psychologists, failed to understand the basic philosophy of the Bardo Thodol. In contrast are the comments on the Tibetan manual by Lama Angarika Govinda. His opening statement at first glance would cause a Judeo-Christian psychologist to snort in impatience. But a close look at these phrases reveals that they are the poetic statement of the genetic situation as currently described by biochemists and DNA researchers. It may be argued that nobody can talk about death with authority who has not died, and since nobody, apparently, has ever returned from death, how can anybody know what death is, or what happens after it? The Tibetan will answer, there is not one person, indeed, not one living being, that has not returned from death. In fact, we all have died many deaths before we came into this incarnation. And what we call birth is merely the reverse side of death, like one of the two sides of a coin, or like a door which we call entrance, from outside and exit, from inside a room. The Lama then goes on to make a second poetic comment about the potentialities of the nerve system, the complexity of the human cortical computer. It is much more astonishing that not everybody remembers his or her previous death, and, because of this lack of remembering, most persons do not believe there was a previous death. But, likewise, they do not remember their recent birth, and yet they do not doubt that they were recently born. They forget that active memory is only a small part of our normal consciousness, and that our subconscious memory registers and preserves every past impression and experience which our waking mind fails to recall. The Lama then proceeds to slice directly to the esoteric meaning of the Bardo Thodol, that core meaning which Jung and indeed most European Orientalists have failed to grasp. For this reason, the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan book vouchsafing liberation from the intermediate state between life and rebirth, which state men call death, has been couched in symbolical language. It is a book which is sealed with the 7 seals of silence, not because its knowledge would be misunderstood, and, therefore, would tend to mislead and harm those who are unfitted to receive it, But the time has come to break the seals of silence, for the human race has come to the juncture where it must decide whether to be content with the subjugation of the material world, or to strive after the conquest of the spiritual world, by subjugating selfish nine desires and transcending self-imposed limitations. The Lama next describes the effects of consciousness expansion techniques. He is talking here about the method. He knows the yogic, but his words are equally applicable to psychedelic experience. There are those who, in virtue of concentration and other yogic practices, are able to bring the subconscious into the realm of discriminative consciousness and, thereby, to draw upon the unrestricted treasury of subconscious memory, wherein are stored the records not only of our past lives but the records of the past of our race, the past of humanity, and of all pre-human forms of life, if not of the very consciousness that makes life possible in this universe. If, through some trick of nature, the gates of an individual's subconsciousness were suddenly to spring open, the unprepared mind would be overwhelmed and crushed. Therefore, the gates of the subconscious are guarded, by all initiate, and hidden behind the veil of mysteries and symbols. In a later section of his foreword, the Lama presents a more detailed elaboration of the inner meaning of the Thodo. If the Bardo Thodal were to be regarded as being based merely upon folklore, or as consisting of religious speculation about death and a hypothesis only to anthropologists and students of religion. But the Bardo Thodal is far more. It is a key to the innermost recesses of the human mind, and a guide for initiate, and for those who are seeking the spiritual path of liberation. Although the Bardo Thodal is at present time widely used in Tibet as a breviary, and read or recited on the occasion of death, for which reason it has been aptly called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, one should not forget that it was originally conceived to serve as a guide not only for the dying and the dead, but for the living as well. And herein lies the justification for having made the Tibetan Book of the Dead accessible to a wider public. Notwithstanding the popular customs and beliefs which, under the influence of age-old traditions of pre-Buddhist origin, have grown around the profound revelations of the Bardo Thodal, it has valued its teaching during their lifetime. There are two things which have caused misunderstanding. One is that the teachings seem to be addressed to the dead or the dying. The other that the title contains the expression, liberation through hearing, in Tibetan, those droll. As a result, there has arisen the belief that it is sufficient to read or recite the Bardo Thodal in the presence of a dying person, or even of a person who has just died, in order to effect his or her liberation. Such misunderstanding could only have arisen among those who do not know that it is one of the oldest and most universal practices for the initiate to go through the experience of death before he can be spiritually reborn. Symbolically, he must die to his past and to his old ego before he can take his place in the new spiritual life into which he has been initiated. The dead or the dying person is addressed in the Bardo Thodal mainly for three reasons. 1. The earnest practitioners of these teachings should regard every moment of his
Я ждал тебя. Я хочу рассказать тебе про черного и белого бога. Это я выбираю между черным и белым. Я выбираю между добром и злом.
Весь мир качается. Нигде и не живет. Любой покой разрушается временем. Любой покой разрушается внешним миром. Любой покой нестабилен. Тот, кто умеет держать равновесие, находясь то справа, то слева, то сверху, то снизу, то внутри, то вовне, способен быть над миром. Именно он способен быть императором черного и белого богов. Черный бог смотрит на белого бога, а белый бог на черного бога. Все обретает краски. Когда черный бог и белый бог становятся единым целым, обнаруживается я. Я вспомнил. Я вспомнил. Я это тот, кто помнит, что было, и думает о том, что будет. Я это тот, кто не в прошлом и не в будущем. Я это сейчас. Весь мир это вечный сейчас. Я центр этого мира. Я центр своей реальности.
Components. We call this primordial mixture ILM. At this first point in the evolution of the present cycle, according to this first-rank physicist, there existed only the unbecome, the unborn, the unformed. And this, according to astrophysicists, is the way it will end, the silent unity of the unformed. The Tibetan Buddhists suggest that the uncluttered intellect can experience what astrophysics confirms. The Buddha Vairoshana, the Dhyani Buddha of the center, manifester of phenomena, is the highest path to enlightenment. As the source of all organic life, in him all things visible and invisible have their consummation and absorption. He is associated with the central realm of the densely packed, i.e., the seed of all universal forces, and things are densely packed together. This remarkable convergence of modern astrophysics and ancient Lamaism demands no complicated explanation. The cosmological awareness and awareness of every other natural process is there in the cortex. You can confirm this preconceptual mystical knowledge by empirical observation and measurement, but it's all there inside your skull. Your neurons know because they are linked directly to the process. are part of it. The mind in its conditioned state, that is to say, when limited to words and ego games, is continuously in thought formation activity. The nerve system in a state of quiescence, alert, awake but not active, is comparable to what Buddhists 12 call the highest state of dhyana, deep meditation, when still united to a human body. The conscious recognition of the clear light induces an ecstatic condition of consciousness such as saints and mystics of the West have called illumination. The first sign is the glimpsing of the clear light of reality, the infallible mind of the pure mystic state. This is the awareness of energy transformations with no imposition of mental categories. The duration of this state varies with the individual. It depends upon experience, security, trust, preparation and the surroundings. In those who have had even a little practical experience of the tranquil state of non-game awareness, and in those who have happy games, the state can last from 30 minutes to several hours. In this state, realization of what mystics call the ultimate truth is possible, provided that sufficient preparation has been made by the person beforehand. Otherwise he cannot benefit now, and must wander on into lower and lower conditions of hallucinations, as determined by his past games, until he drops back to routine reality. It is important to remember that the conscious expansion process is the reverse of the birth process, birth being the beginning of game life and the ego loss experience being a temporary ending of game life. But in both there is a passing from one state of consciousness into another. And just as an infant must wake up and learn from experience the nature of this world, so likewise a person at the moment of consciousness expansion must wake up in this new brilliant world and become familiar.
So sit and relax, find your place in the cove. Second, I'll light up our magical stove.
There exist, therefore, unlimited possibilities for, on the one hand, delightful sensuous, intellectual and emotional novelties if one floats with the current, and, on the other hand, fearful ambuscades of confusion and terror if one tries to impose his will on the experience. The purpose of this part of the manual is to prepare the person for the choice points which arise during this stage. Strange sounds, weird sights and disturbed visions may occur. These can awe, frighten and terrify unless one is prepared. The experienced person will be able to maintain the recognition that all perceptions come from within and will be able to sit quietly, controlling his expanded awareness like a phantasmagoric multidimensional television set. The most acute and sensitive hallucinations, visual, auditory, touch, smell, physical and bodily, the most exquisite reactions, compassionate insight into the self, the world. The key is in action. Passive integration with all that occurs around you. If you try to impose your will, use your mind, rationalize, seek explanations, you will get caught in hallucinatory whirlpools. The motto, peace, acceptance. It is all an ever-changing panorama. You are temporarily removed from the world of game. Enjoy it. The inexperienced in those two who ego control is important may find this passivity impossible. If you cannot remain inactive and subdue your will, then the one certain activity which can reduce panic and pull you out of hallucinatory mind games is physical contact with another person. Go to the guide or to another participant and put your head on his lap or chest. Put your face next to his and concentrate on the movement and sound of his inspiration. Breathe deeply and feel the air rush in and the sighing release. This is the oldest form of living communication, the brotherhood of breath. The guide's hand on your forehead may add to the relaxation. Contact with another participant may be misunderstood and provoke sexual hallucinations. For this reason, helping contact should be made explicit by prearrangement. Unprepared participants may impose sexual fears or fantasies on the contact. Turn them off. They are karmic illusory productions. The tender, gentle, supportive huddling together of participants is a natural development during the second phase. Do not try to rationalize this contact. Human beings and, for that matter, most all mobile terrestrial creatures have been huddling together during long, dark confused nights for several 100,000 years. Breathe in and breathe out with you companions. We are all one. That's what your breath is telling you. Explanation of the second bardo. The underlying problem of the second bardo is that any and every shape, human, divine, diabolical, heroic, evil, animal, thing, which the human brain conjures up or the past life recalls, can present itself to consciousness. Shapes and forms and sounds whirling by endlessly. The underlying solution, repeated again and again, is to recognize that your brain is producing the visions. They do not exist. Nothing exists except as your consciousness gives it life. 18 You are standing on the threshold of recognizing the truth. There is no reality behind any of the phenomena of the ego-lost state, save the illusions stored up in your own mind either as accretions from game, Zhang's experience or as gifts from organic physical nature and its billion-year-old past history. Recognition of this truth gives liberation. There is, of course, no way of classifying the infinite permutations and combinations of visionary elements. The cortex contains file cards for billions of images from the history of the person, of the race, and of living forms. Any of these, at the rate of 100 million per second, according to neurophysiologists, can flood into awareness. Bobbing around in this brilliant, symphonic sea of imagery is the remnant of the conceptual mind. On the endless watery turbulence of the Pacific Ocean bobs a tiny open mouth shouting, between saline mouthfuls, order. System. Explain all this. One cannot predict what visions will occur, nor their sequence. One can only urge the participants to shut the mouth, breathe through the nose, and turn off the fidgety, rationalizing mind. But only the experienced person of mystical bent can do this, and thus remain in serene enlightenment. The unprepared person will be confused or, worse, panicky. The intellectual struggle to control the ocean. In order to guide the person, to help him organize his visions into explicable units, the Jnana Bardo was written. There are two sections. 1. 7 peaceful deities with their symmetrically opposed ego traps. 2. 8 wrathful deities who can be joyfully accepted as visionary productions, or fled from in terror. Each of the 7 peaceful deities, bisexual father-mother figures, are accompanied by consorts, attendants, lesser deities, saints, angels, heroes. Each of the wrathful deities is similarly accompanied. Lights, symbolic objects, beautiful, horrid, threatening, seething, are likewise seen. If read literally, the Tibetan Book of the Dead would have you expect the master of all visible shapes, or his opposite, the fondness for stupidity on the first day, the immovable deity of happiness and his consort, attendants and opposite on the second, etc. The manual should, of course, not be used rigidly, exoterically, but should be taken in its esoteric, allegorical form. Read from this perspective, we see that the lamas have listed or named 1,000 images which can boil up in the ever-changing jeweled mosaic of the retina, that multi-layered swamp of billions of rods and cones, infiltrated, like a Persian rug or a Mayan carving, with countless multicolored capillaries. By preparatory reading of the manual and by its repetition during the experience, the novice is led by a suggestion to recognize this fantastic retinal kaleidoscope. Most important, he is told that they come from within. All deities and demons, all heavens and hells are internal. The student with a particular interest in Tibetan or Tantric Buddhism should steep himself in the text of the Jnana Bardo. He should obtain colored plates of the 14 dramas of the Bardo, and he should arrange to have the guide lead him through the prescribed sequence during the drug session. This will provide an unforgettable series of liberations and will permit the devotee to emerge from the experience reincarnated in the Lamist tradition. The aim of this manual is to make available the general outline of the Tibetan book and to translate it into psychedelic English. For this reason we shall not present the detailed sequence of Lamist hallucinations but, rather, list some apparitions commonly reported by Westerners. 19 Following the Tibetan Thodo, we have classified second Bardo visions into 7 types. 1. The source or creator vision. 2. The internal flow of archetypal processes. 3. The fire flow of internal unity. 4. The wave vibration structure of external forms. 5. The vibratory waves of external unity. 6. The retinal circus. 7. The magic theater. We owe the phrase retinal circus to Henri Michaud, Miserable Miracle, and the term magic theater to Hermann Hesse, Steppenwolf. Visions 2 and 3 involve closed eyes and no contact with external stimuli. In Vision 2 the internal imagery is primarily conceptual. The experience can range from revelation and insight to confusion and chaos, but the cognitive, intellectual meaning is paramount. In Vision 3 the internal imagery is primarily emotional. The experience can range from love and ecstatic unity to fear, distrust and isolation. Visions 4 and 5 involve open eyes and rapt attention to external stimuli, such as sounds, lights, touch, etc. In Vision 4 the external imagery is primarily conceptual and in Vision 5 emotional factors predominate. The sevenfold table just defined bears some similarity to the mandalic schema of the peaceful deities listed for the second Bardo in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The peaceful visions. Vision 1, the source, the first peaceful deity listed by the Bardo Thodo is the Bhagavan Vairocana, who occupies the center of the mandala of the 5 dhyani bhusas. His attributes of source power have been translated into those of the monotheistic creator of Western religions. Eyes closed, external stimuli ignored. The white light, or first Bardo energy, may be interpreted as God the Creator, the spreader of the seed, the power which makes all shapes visible, seed of all that is, sovereign power, the all-powerful, the central sun. the one truth, the source of all organic life, the Divine Mother, the female creative principle, Mother of the space of heaven, Radiant Father Mother. Magnificent revelations, both spiritual and philosophic, can occur at this point, making the highest union of experience and intellect. But, because of bad karma, usually religious beliefs of a monotheistic or punitive nature, the glorious light of the seed wisdom it can produce awe and terror. The person will wish to flee and will beget a fondness for the dull white light symbolizing stupidity. Persons from a Judeo-Christian background conceive of an enormous gulf between divinity, which is up there, and the self, down here. Christian mystics' claims to unity with divine radiance has always posed problems for theologians who are committed to the cosmological subject-object distinction. Most Westerners, therefore, find it difficult to attain unity with the source light. If the guide ascertains that the voyager is struggling with thoughts or feelings about the creative source energy, he can read the appropriate instructions. Greater than instructions for Vision 1, the Source 20 Vision 2. The internal flow of archetypal processes, eyes closed, external stimuli ignored. Intellectual aspects. If the undifferentiated light of the first bardo or of the source energy is lost, luminous waves of differentiated forms can flood through the consciousness. The person's mind begins to identify these figures, that is, to label them and experience revelations about the life process. Lama Govinda tells us that Amagaziti represents the mysterious activity of spiritual forces, which work removed from the senses, invisible and imperceptible, with the aim of guiding the individual, or, more properly, all living beings, towards the maturity of knowledge and liberation. The yellow light of an inner sun invisible to human eyes, in which the unfathomable space of the universe seems to open itself for the serene mystic green of Amagaziti. On the elementary plane, this all-pervading power corresponds to the element of air, the principle of movement and extension, of life and breath, prana. Lama Govinda. Foundations of Tibetan Mysticism. Loden. E.P. Dutton and Company, Incorporated, 1959, p. 120. The fifth day of the Bharathodal confronts the deceased with the Bhagavan Buddha Amagaziti, Almighty Conqueror, from the green norther realm of successful performance of best actions, attended by a Divine Mother, and two bodhisattvas representing the mental functions of equilibrium, immutability, and almighty power, and clear of obscurations. Specifically, the subject is caught up in an endless flow of colored forms, microbiological shapes, cellular acrobatics, capillary whirling. The cortex is turned in on molecular processes which are completely new and strange, a Niagara of abstract designs. The life stream flowing. These visions might perhaps be described as pure sensations of cellular and subcellular processes. It is uncertain whether they involve the retina and/or the visual cortex, or whether they are flashes of direct, molecular sensation in other areas of the central nervous system. They are subjectively described as internal visions. Another class of internal process images involves sound. Again, we do not know whether these sensations originate in the auditory apparatus and/or in the auditory cortex, or whether they are flashes of direct, molecular sensations in other areas. They are subjectively described as internal sounds: clicking, thudding, clashing, soughing, ringing, tapping, moaning, shrill whistles. Tibetan Book includes a brilliant discussion of internal process noises. Innumerable other kinds of musical instruments, filling with music the whole world systems and causing them to vibrate, to quake and tremble with sounds so mighty as to daze one's brain. Tibetan lamas, in chanting their rituals, employ 7 or 8 sorts of musical instruments. Big drums, cymbals, commonly brass, conch shells, bells, like the hand bells used in the Christian mass service, timbrels, small clarionets, sounding like Highland bagpipes, big trumpets, and human thigh-bone trumpets. Although the combined sounds of these instruments are far from being melodious, The lamas maintain that they psychically produce in the devotee an attitude of deep veneration and faith, because they are the counterparts of the natural sounds which one's own body is heard producing when the fingers are put in the ears to shut out external sounds. Stopping the ears thus, there are heard a thudding sound, like that of a big drum being beaten, a clashing sound, as of cymbals, a soughing sound, as of a wind moving through the forest, as when a conch shell is blown, a ringing as of bells, a sharp tapping sound, as when a timbrel is used, a moaning sound, like that of a clarionet, a bass moaning sound, as if made with a big trumpet, and a shriller sound, as of a thigh-bone trumpet. Not only is this interesting as a theory of Tibetan sacred music, but it gives the clue to the esoteric interpretation of the symbolical natural 21 sounds of truth, referred to in the second paragraph following, and elsewhere in our text, which are said to be, or to proceed from, the intellectual faculties within the human mentality. Evans Wentz, p. 128. These noises, like the visions, are direct sensations unencumbered by mental concepts. Raw, molecular, dancing units of energy. The mind sweeps in and out of this evolutionary stream, creating cosmological revelations. Dozens of mythical and Darwinian insights flash into awareness. The person is allowed to glance back down the flow of time and to perceive how the life energy continually manifests itself in forms, transient, always changing, reforming. Microscopic forms merge with primal creative myths. The mirror of consciousness is held up to the life stream. As long as the person floats with the current, he is exposed to a billion-year lesson in cosmology. But the drag of the mind is always present. The tendency to impose arbitrary, isolating order on the organic process. Sometimes the voyager feels he should report back his vision. He converts the life flow into a cosmic chaos of cheap, ugly dime store objects, brassy, vulgar and useless. The person may become terrified at the prospect of being engulfed by them. The awesome sounds may be heard as hideous, clashing, 22 oppressive, grating noises. The person will attempt to escape from these perceptions into restless external activity, talking, moving around, etc., or into conceptual, analytic, mental activity. The experience is the same, the intellectual interpretation is different. Instead of revelation, there is confusion. Instead of calm joy, there is fear. The guide, recognizing the voyager to be in such a state, can help him get free by reading the greater than instructions for Vision 2. Vision 3, the fire flow of internal unity, eyes closed, external stimuli ignored, emotional aspects. The first Bardo instructions should keep you face to face with the void ecstasy. Yet there are classes of men who, having carried over karmic conflict about feeling inhibition, prove unable to hold the pure experience beyond all feelings, and slip into emotionally toned visions. The undifferentiated energy of the first Bardo is woven into visionary games in the form of intense feelings. Exquisite, intense, pulsating sensations of unity and love will be felt. The negative counterpart is feelings of detachment, greed, isolation and bodily concerns. It comes about this way. The pure flow of energy loses its white void quality and becomes sensed as intense.
Chupacabra.
yourself a free spirit.
cortex. My consciousness has created everything of which I am conscious, my sermons, striving to freeze them back into the familiar robot forms. All solidity is gone. All phenomena are paper images pasted on the glass screen of consciousness. For the unprepared, or for the person whose karmic residue stresses control, the discovery of the wave nature of all structure, the Maya revelation, is a disastrous weapon. Auditory phenomena are of equal importance. Here the solid, labeled nature of converted into pure sensation, and synesthesia, mixture of sense modalities occurs. Sounds are colors. External sensations hitting. The most dramatic auditory visions occur with music. Just as any object radiates a pattern of electrons, naked energy trembling in space, timeless. The movement of notes, like the shuttling of oscillograph beams, each capturing all energy. Unforgettable revelations about the nature of reality occur at these waves can be sensed as noise. For one who is compelled to institute order, his and him, it is at least annoying and disturbing to have the raw tattoo of sound resonate. What an irreverent concept, the divine passing their own meaning to a serene passage through this visionary territory. The subject who has studied this eyes and flow with it. The sensitive guide will be ready that the subject is wandering in the fourth vision. If the voyager's eyes are open, aspects as the learned perceptions disappear in the structure of the is to maintain a pure, content-free awareness, first bardo. Despite the preparations, one is likely to be led backwards by one's own mental inclinations into too hallucinatory or revelatory interpretations of reality or fright confusion of the fourth vision, described.